Okay, we're live.
Okay, well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good everything to everybody. And I hope everybody is safe in these interesting times that we now find ourselves. And welcome to those of us joining on this interactive session dealing with conformity assessment, management and risk. And I'd like to just start off by introducing myself firstly. My name is Chris Agius. I have a background in electrical engineering and I am the IECEx Executive Secretary since the IECEx system began some time ago now, back in 1996. So a little bit of time. Hello. And I'd like to start off by asking those of you joining us today if you would just like to just very quickly introduce yourselves by your name and just mention where you're from, which part of the world. I can see there, I'm starting there with, I see we have AJ, Naira. AJ, would you just like to just say hello and let us know where you are from at the moment?
Good evening to everyone, especially to you, Chris. I'm coming from Australia and I have been in the certification business for the last around 25 years. It has been my good fortune to have worked closely with you, Chris Agius. So I'm looking forward to this session today. Thank you.
Thank you. We have, I can see Claire with us as well. Just
Yeah.
a quick hello, Claire.
Okay, I'm Claire. I live in Geneva, Switzerland. I used to work at the IEC. I'm retired now, but still working as I did before with Chris, writing articles for IECEx and also for the other system, IECQ. And that's about it.
Thank you. Quick one there from Sylvia.
Hello, my name is Sylvia and I support the IEC with social media, and so I'm very pleased to be able to support you today with questions from the chat and questions from Facebook, and really look forward to learning more.
Thank you. And I see Victoria Haley. Hello, Victoria.
Hello, I'm coming from Toronto, Canada, and I'm a member of JTC1. Thank you for this session.
Thank you. Richard McDermott.
Hey, good morning, Chris. Richard McDermott here from Cornwall, United States.
Thank you. I see a Martin Rieder. Martin, hi there. No. Okay, we'll move on to Mike Woebbeking. Hi, Mike. How are you today?
Hello, everyone. This is Mike Woebbeking speaking from Germany. I'm part of IEC TC88 and IEC RE.
Thank you. And Wolfram, how are you today?
Excellent, Chris. Hello, everybody. My name is Wolfram Zeitz. I'm the Executive Secretary for IEC RE and IEC EE, so having a similar role as Chris has for the other two CA systems from IEC. And I'm looking forward to this session moderated by Chris. Thank you.
Thank you. And Henry, I see we have a Henry with us. Hi, Henry.
Hi, this is Henry from Tanzania, the affiliate country member.
Hey, welcome. Now, Martin, are you able to speak with us? Okay, we'll try Martin a little later on. I think we did have somebody else as well. Have I got someone else there? If not, let's start off. We have a number of questions that have been posted recently and with the registrations. And I'd like to just start by, before we launch into those questions, I'd like to just simply start off by having a bit of a general discussion and understanding. When we talk about conformity assessment, now we do say that IEC is heavily involved in conformity assessment. Conformity assessment is one of the pillars of IEC. And one of the things I wanted to highlight right at the start is a clarification of what we mean by conformity assessment. When we hear the term conformity assessment, it is a general broad term that encompasses many, many aspects that are related to assessing conformance. And I'm sure we've all heard of terms testing, certification, attestation, accreditation, approval. All of these are activities that fall under the broad umbrella of conformity assessment. And you're going to hear different terms that we refer to throughout the course of this session. And I would compel you to take a close look at a very important series of standards, joint ISO IEC standards, the 17,000 series, ISO IEC 17,000 series of standards that cover all aspects of conformity assessment and all the certification activities that you'll hear about. What I would recommend, anybody that has a role or an interest in any aspect of conformity assessment, I would compel that you familiarise yourself with the terminology. And terminology is best explained in ISO IEC 17,000. And it explains the terms of accreditation, certification, and so on. So it's very important that you understand what it is you're talking about before we start embarking on any discussions on conformity assessment. Now, we have seen a question listed that asked the question, why is IEC involved in conformity assessment? And that seems to touch on a question, and a couple of questions really, that were submitted with the registrations. And one in particular that has asked the question, how is national accreditation utilised within the IEC CA or Conformity Assessment Systems? And then also what's new in IECEx. But I want to take the first part, national accreditation. And the reason I mentioned reference to ISO IEC 17,000 is because it's imperative to understand the terminology. And if we look at conformity assessment or assessing conformity is not just something limited to the certification community. It's something that each and every one of us perform daily. For example, a very simple example is when we are buying our groceries. When we go and select fruit and vegetables, you'll see people looking, picking up, holding, feeling, evaluating. That is a form of assessing conformity. Now, of course, everyone is doing things differently to different criteria. Now, when we step into the field of conformity assessment, formal conformity assessment, and looking at accreditation, we find that to try and assist at ensuring a consistent approach, we find that there are organisations that offer national accreditation. Now, accreditation, as defined in ISO IEC 17,000, defines accreditation as third-party attestation or confirmation related to a certification or conformity assessment body conveying formal demonstration of its competence to carry out specific tasks. So in other words, accreditation is providing some form of formal recognition of a body to be able to carry out certain tasks related to conformity assessment. Now, accreditation is done by individual accreditation bodies, and each of them, while there is an element of consistency because we do use the 17,000 series of standards, we necessarily do find that varying approaches do creep in to the approach taken by the different accreditation fraternities. From an IEC perspective, we feel that it's imperative that we have standardized approach to conformity assessment or certification. So looking at accreditation, accreditation generally follows the philosophy that we can have, say, 3 different bodies, have different procedures, provide different styles of reporting or certificates that are issued, but yet have competence to do so and achieve a similar end result. In IEC, the IEC community feel that that's not sufficient. we are all about standardization, and therefore we find that it's essential in practice to have a standardized way of doing testing and certification, not just to evaluate the competence of organizations, but that we in fact have a standardized way, which is why you'll find in the IEC Conformity Assessment Systems, our schemes have a single set of rules, single set of operational procedures, a single reporting format, and a single style of certification format that must be adopted by all of the bodies that are participating. Now, how does national accreditation play a role in that area? In the IEC Conformity Assessment Systems, to ensure the consistency, we also embrace the concept of peer evaluation or peer assessment. So it's important that all of the bodies accept each other through mutual recognition, which must be achieved by way of a peer assessment process. National accreditation is utilised as part of the evidence gathering exercise for demonstrating compliance. So what we find is that it's helpful to achieve a body's acceptance into the conformity assessment network, but in most of our CA systems and our approach in the IEC community is that it is not the only way. We need a little bit more. So with that, I would just ask perhaps if Wolfram would like to just come in and give a remark in terms of how the accreditation may also be utilised within some of the systems that he is responsible for. Wolfram.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. I mean, I can fully echo what you just said and referred about. We do fully acknowledge the advantages of accreditation, and accreditation will be acknowledged as a part of our peer assessment process. That means we are not trying to duplicate everything which is done and achieved during the accreditation process. But as you said, the major difference is that we are talking here about a community of laboratories, certification bodies, and inspection bodies who are working based on the very same processes. And the peer assessment is about, first of all, the mutual confidence in each other's work and about the adherence to these unique sets of processes within our conformity assessment systems. And we have within the peer assessment process experts carrying out that tasks on a daily basis in their own organization and being fully capable and being, of course, the experts of evaluating if other organizations also follow these rules and principles. So, and this adds on value to the already existing accreditation. So as Chris said, we take it one step further and we add this additional layer of verification and this additional layer of trust, of mutual confidence. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Wolfram. So in a practical sense, we do make use of accreditation in the conformity assessment systems, and the general approach is that one of the requirements for acceptance in the conformity assessment systems in the IEC is compliance with the relevant ISO IEC 17000 standard. In the case of testing, 17025, certification for products, 1765, personnel certification, 17024. Now, what we find in the IECEx itself have stated that, well, if we find the body holds accreditation, that may help reduce the need to carry out a full and complete evaluation of the organisation to the ISO IEC standard. We also note that our assessment process and our qualification regime in the IECEx requires that certification bodies and test labs are evaluated on an annual basis to ensure they continue to comply with the relevant requirements of the schemes. However, if they hold national accreditation, then we find it's quite useful that there is no need for the IECEx to carry out its own formal assessment, rather to confirm that A, the accreditation is current, and B, that the scope of accreditation aligns with the scope of acceptance in the systems. So I hope that helps explain in a nutshell how accreditation is utilised. There was a further question, or a second part of that question: what is new in IECEx? And in IECEx, the IECEx is the IEC system for operating the only complete single international certification scheme covering EX equipment, EX services such as repair and overhaul, and also the certification of competence of persons involved in the EX field. In terms of what's new, in more recent times, IECEx has expanded way beyond the certification of electrical equipment for the EX field to also cover what we refer to as non-electrical EX equipment, or EX or mechanical EX equipment, complying with the ISO 80079 series of standards. We've also introduced one of the newer standards or publications of the IEC TC 31, 60079-46, dealing with assemblies. And in more recent times, we've also introduced a program for the recognition of training organisations that provide training in the field of EX. So there's a number of new initiatives that we find that are on offer from IECEx due to the request and demand coming from industry. I think, AJ, I might just invite you to chime in here, because someone that's quite active, long-standing activity in the IECEx, and also one of our very important lead assessors that carries out the peer assessments. If you'd like to just provide any remarks about how you find industry's acceptance and need for some of these newer services of the IECEx. Thank you, AJ.
Thank you so much, Chris, for inviting me. My own experience of certification has extended to the time when IECEx was not present. At that time, we did have our own national certification in Australia. But there was no doubt about it that all the countries had got very different requirements for certification. Some of them would be relying on inspection of the final product. Some of them would not be relying on the inspection, but would be relying on just a test report. And some of them would be requiring a ISO 9001 audit to be included as well. So every country had practically their own system. It was with this IECEx system that we all did get together to form one set of rules. And the ultimate objective was that there would be one set of rules, one set of test report, one assessment of the manufacturer, and one certificate to be used commonly in the entire world. That system that I have been able to be part of with you, Chris, has of course been so well accepted that now, regardless of the national needs for certification, the IECEx certification seems to be the backbone to be able to support national accreditation as well. In my own experience as a peer assessor, it has been my responsibility and also my pleasure to be able to go across and see other test laboratories and certifying bodies with the intention always to be the same, to be able to encourage that all other laboratories and certifying bodies are being able to build up their strength in their own countries to be able to offer the product similar to all the others. It has often been a lot of criticism in that some bodies say that we are better than the others, but the way that IECEx has done is not a matter of saying that we are better or not. The main thing is, let's bring the others up to the same level so that we can be able to facilitate trade internationally. And I do believe we have come an extremely long way on that journey, in that all products now, when they receive that IECEx certificate, they automatically are well accepted as a backbone for a subsequent national certification if required. And we can say very proudly that Australia and New Zealand have always been accepting IECEx certificates delivered from any IECEx certifying body or laboratory or certifying body worldwide without requiring anything further for acceptance in the industry in Australia and New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, AJ. And I might also just add at this point that if any of our other colleagues that are participating would like to raise a question or a comment, we do have the raise your hand feature that we are monitoring, that Sylvia is monitoring. So don't forget to use that if you'd like to raise a question or a comment. Now, just to support AJ's remarks, it also then leads us into a further question that we have received as well, that poses the question, how does or what aspects of IECEx can be utilised to assist one of our new children, as we call new child, the IECRE for renewable energies. And we found that in the IECEx, our humble beginnings in the EX community was to operate IECEx as a mutual recognition framework, very similar to what we have, as Wolfram mentioned, in the IECECB scheme. And that is how the IECEx started life. But it then went a little bit beyond the mutual recognition to actually operating a full certificate of conformity scheme. And with that, the EX community decided to run, operate and function as a business, both with a business mindset and a business purpose. And as AJ has just mentioned, rather than promoting individual bodies, all the bodies and the community came together to develop, build and promote the IECEx brand as itself. So therefore, from day one, the role of the secretary, now termed IECEx Executive Secretary, was assigned the function of a CEO for the system. So that way it felt the business, the IECEx must run as a business and have a business mindset. One of the core elements of the IECEx has been for all members to come together and promote the brand. Now, having started operating in 1999 by just issuing reports and then 2003 certificates, it then went on to creating the new schemes to fill and address the problems and difficulties that industry were facing. So one element there I would recommend to the IECRE community is to come together, work together on promoting the IECRE as a brand and treat it as a business. Because one of the questions we raised in the early days was, how well do we think IECEx will be accepted in the marketplace? And by promoting the IECEx as its own brand, we found that then created the need and also the value proposition of the IECEx to the community. One of the jewels in the crown of the IECEx has been the well-renowned IECEx online certificate system. Now let's be clear, the online certificate system is not a database of certificates. Rather, it is a true online system where the IECEx certification bodies, through their own unique passwords, log onto the website system, create the IECEx certificate live online. It is saved in draft form while the certification project is being undertaken. Once it's completed, the certificate is then made current and public, and it is the online certificate that remains as the master control version, which is available for full public viewing and available for download. However, the online electronic version remains the master control version. Now, having all certificates issued by all certification bodies located in the one place on the IECEx website also provides an additional value to the community, because it also serves someone as a buyer's guide of EX products or services. So there's a few things there that we would certainly commend to our friends in the IECRE, and I know that some of these areas are being explored at the moment. And with that note, I might invite Mike, Mike Woebbeking, if you would like to comment on any of those aspects further, or anything else, especially relating to IECRE, as I know, Mike, you're one of the original founding members of the IECRE system, and continues to do a great deal of work in support of IECRE. So, Mike, any remarks from your side?
Thanks, Chris. I think very helpful comments on all the statements now from the beginning of this call till now, because both aspects, the topic of accreditation and peer assessment, as well as how to promote the system better and what can we do to further improve it, are topics we are discussing in IECRE. So thanks for those comments. No further questions regarding that. Just maybe if you could shed some light on your early days in the scheme, what you did as concrete actions to get things rolling and to get to such a success as you see it today in your schemes.
Yes, sure, Mike, thank you for that. I think one of the things, and again, AJ was certainly very active with myself and many, many others in bringing the IECEx to fruition. And let me point out, it certainly was no easy ride, and I'm sure AJ would recall many we refer to as the potholes in the road that we all fell down and dragged ourselves out of. But nevertheless, we learned from those. And one of them, of course, as I keep saying, was the real concrete thing to come together and work together as a family to promote the brand itself of IECEx. Perhaps one of the other things that does assist IECEx is the fact that in the standards area, it is a requirement of the standards that equipment that is covered by any form of certification or a certificate, that the certificate reference number must be included on the product label. So therefore, we find the IECEx number also appears on the product. So that is something that also assists in terms of the visibility and promotion of IECEx. But I do have to say the online certificate system was certainly paramount in projecting the IECEx further. And then when we started to look at some of the other needs, such as services and also the certification of competence, those were some of the key aspects. AJ, I just wonder if I could bring you in here to perhaps also recall some of your memories that you might find that were some of the key aspects that assisted in moving IECEx forward. Thank you.
Chris, my own view on how IECEx came into being and how it became so successful. While there is no doubt about it that the online certificate system has been very instrumental in making the final outcome, the certificate, look uniform, regardless of which certifying body is creating the certificate. That uniformity of look, again, is probably touching on that issue that you had raised about having a single set of rules which defines the IECEx system. The other aspect that I would probably be able to provide as an input to the IECRE system has been the annual meetings, not only just the annual, maybe even the 6 monthly meetings that you have always been initiating and have been running as the backbone, which produces a set of rules which everyone has been able to accept. We have all seen that correspondences are never the way by which we would ultimately get acceptance on a single platform. And I have got my memories right from 1999 onwards to now, in that it is at that time when on the floor of the meeting, we have people who have come from all opposite directions, but have all left at the end of the day with a single agreement, because once again, it's not one of what we would say that everybody gets their way. It's a consensus. And that consensus has always been achieved by having that meeting where at the end of the day, when we finish our meeting, the decisions are taken and we all have to then live with it. So that is my further input really that I would like to able to offer to IECRE.
Yes, thank you, AJ. That's a very, very important point, and one that I must say I now recall, as you rightly point out, the fact that all these years and all of our many, many annual meetings and operational meetings, I seem to have difficulty recalling when we've actually had to go to formal voting on an issue. As you rightly point out, we've always worked to ensure that we can bring everybody along together, even if that's meant a slight delay in progressing forward in a particular direction. But we want to make sure that everybody feels that they are part of the final approach, the final decision. And also too, unfortunately, in this current climate with travel restrictions, the networking feature of holding face-to-face meetings is not something we can enjoy today, but it's been also part of that consensus building, because what we may find that we have difficulties in the formal meeting during the coffee breaks, the lunch breaks, the evening breaks. We get together, network, and then we come up with a solution. And as you rightly point out, AJ, we all work together to go forward all in one direction. So thank you for that, AJ. That was certainly another message we would certainly convey to the IECRE community. I've got a question here that, that was submitted along with the registration that also talks, and when we talk about online certificates, there's a question that's been posed. Contents of certificates need to be detailed and formalised. What is your view? In terms of the contents of certificates, now we've just touched on the issue of online certificate system for the IECEx. And let me firstly start by just saying how important it is to distinguish, when we talk about certificates, how important it is to distinguish what certificates we're actually talking about. And this is why I started this session making reference to the ISO IEC 17000 standard for terms and definitions. Because we hear the terms in terms of certificates, we hear things called certificates of conformity, test certificate, type examination certificate, certificate of attendance, certificate of completion, and on it goes. But when we talk about IECEx, we're talking about a certificate of conformity. And the message we need to understand that is being conveyed by the issuer of a certificate of conformity under IECEx is that the organisation listed on the IECEx certificate has the capability of producing equipment identified on the certificate as to be in compliance with the standards listed in the IECEx certificate. Now, to achieve the issuing of the certificate, the IECEx certified equipment scheme have got two core elements that must be satisfactorily completed. Firstly, successful assessment and type testing of a sample that's representative of production, plus the successful completion of a factory audit to ensure that the manufacturing is controlled and also provides confidence that the sample that passed testing will also be reproduced during manufacturing. Now, once the certificate is issued, the IECEx scheme, being a Type 5 certificate actually requires ongoing surveillance auditing of the factory to ensure and provide assurance of ongoing compliance with the standards listed on the certificate itself. So this is how the certification body is able to convey the message of compliance with the listed standards via issuing and maintaining a certificate as being current. Now, I'll give that bit of background because it is important from an IECEx point of view when issuing a certificate of conformity that the certificate is adequately describing the product that it is covered by the certificate. And so that way, a reader of the certificate is able to link the certificate to the product that's being covered. Noting, of course, that the certificate number appears on the actual product itself. The certificate number appears on the product. So when you're considering contents of certificates, please understand what certificates you're talking about, because I know that we have varying types of certificates in the marketplace covering different aspects. You need to understand what those certificates are covering. Now, I'm just wondering here, Wolfram, I wonder if there's something you may like to comment. I've just given an outline there of what certificates are covering in terms of the IECEx. Would you like to just give us a bit of information about the IECEE and also the IECRE? Because once we've done that, I will also hit you with a question that we've got in the chat box relating to IECEE in a moment. Thank you, Wolfram.
That's what I was already afraid of, that you might pose that question to me, but no problem at all. In terms of contents of the certificate, of course, since the guiding reference for certification is the ISO IEC 17065, and they give you already a very good idea about what's the minimum content of a certificate. However, as also highlighted earlier in this session already, one of the advantages of the IECCA systems is that the certificates, even though they are issued by different certification bodies, they have the same look and feel. They have a kind of a corporate identity. So all our certificates are looking within one system pretty much alike, and the content is aligned. In every system, you will find a guiding document, usually your OD, which is describing exactly what's included in that certificate. And yes, it's always a balance. And when you look into the different systems, it also is defined a little bit by the need of the particular industry, how much information is needed. When you compare IECEE certificate with an IECRE certificate, you will find that in the certificate itself is less information in EE, but it still complies fully with 17065, while in IECRE, there's much more technical information. The background there is that IECEE certificate is only valid in combination with the report, where you find all the technical informations already. So my call on this is a system needs to find way how its certificates are very easy identified as being part of the system, and by conveying enough information to easy identify the product, identify the basis what the product is certified or the service is certified against, and enough technical information to verify with the actual product. And everything else is actually part of the report because it goes into technical detail rather than the certificate. And since Chris already were referring to the question we received in the chat, most likely all of you can read that as well, but I read it out. It asks, in some countries, they are only based on conformity reports issued with an ILAC and national accreditation logo. In the IECEE, they cannot find such logos. How can we help to explain that IECEE report is better or similar? We actually had this topic earlier when we were talking about accreditation. When we talk about purely accreditation, it is verified that a lab or a certification body is competent to work as such within its scope and based on the 17,000 series. While the IEC Conformity Assessment Systems go one step further. They describe a harmonized, unique process on how to do the conformity assessment. And that's exactly the difference. If you have now a test report or a certificate of conformity with an accreditation logo on that, ILAC or IAF, then you can be sure that all the requirements from IAF and ILAC are covered. But it doesn't give you an indication if also this harmonized process for conformity assessment was applied. And that one you will find only if you have the IECEE logo on it or the logo of one of our other conformity assessment systems. So if you would have now a logo with only the national accreditation, certificate or report with only the national accreditation logo, you would never know if for this conformity assessment, the rules, processes, and regulations of the IEC conformity assessment would have been accounted for. So therefore, there is this difference, and also that's why it's easy to explain that with the IECE logo, you actually have one additional layer rather than less than the just ILAC national accreditation logo. I hope that that explains the question and sheds some background on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Wolfram, and for answering that question. I notice we have, I think is it Lim, is it, that's posed the question. You would like to speak, please.
Yes, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Wolfram and AJ. I have answered a part of that questions that I asked. Thank you. I do have another added part is that, Chris, you mentioned on the IECEx that the product would have to have the number to tally with that certificate. Am I correct? You mentioned that?
That is correct.
And is that the same for IECEE?
Let me just start with the IECEx, and then
Okay.
I'll invite Wolfram to talk about IECEE. The IECEx, the requirement to have a certificate reference number included on the product is not a requirement of the scheme itself, but rather it's a requirement of the standard. The standard IEC 60079-0 general requirements under product marking lists the various items that must be included, such as ratings, the EX, explosion protection techniques, gas grouping, temperature ratings, and so on. It also requires that if the manufacturer is claiming that a certificate has been issued for the product, then the certificate reference number must be shown on the product marking. So it's not requiring that the product be certified. It is actually requiring that if there is a claim that the product is covered by a certificate, then the certificate reference number must be shown. And that's why, and it also gives the format that it's to be shown in. So that's why the IECEx certificate reference number is clearly shown on the certificate, from the certificate is clearly shown on the product label. So it's a requirement of the standard. Wolfram, I wonder if you'd like to comment on the IECEE CB scheme.
Yeah, sure. And thanks to you, Chris, that you mentioned already that this requirement is rooted in the standard rather than in the conformity assessment system and its procedures. And based on the standards which are part of the scope of the IECEE, none of these standards has a similar requirement that a certification number has to be included if available on the marking. So therefore, I can simply answer that question with no. The products covered by the standards in the scope of IECEE don't have such a requirement. Hence, such products don't have a certificate number on their label. Thank you.
Thank you, Wolfram. Just before I move on to the next question, I noticed that we do have, sorry. Yes.
Sorry, yes.
No, please proceed.
Yeah, okay. Just a quick one. Then again, that I found that is a document to support sometimes when I have to explain. And that is, I think, 2015. There's a MOU between the IEC and the ILEC document. There's a sort of MOU to have that recognition.
Yes, we certainly have a memorandum of understanding, and that actually extends not just to ILAC, but between IEC, ILAC, and the IAF, the International Accreditation Forum. And the basis of the MOU, the memorandum of understanding, is that we agreed to cooperate in the area of assessments. And we have the concept, what we call unified assessments. We started talking about peer assessment earlier on today, and the fact that if a certifying body or a test lab wishes to join any of the conformity assessment systems in IEC, they are subjected to a peer assessment. Well, the majority, overwhelming majority of those bodies also happen to hold accreditation by an accreditation body that's a member of ILAC or the IAF. What we do provide through this cooperation is that rather than having separate independent assessments, we can actually, and we have successfully carried out what we call joint or unified assessments. So the one assessment is addressing the requirements of the ILAC or the IAF accreditation member accreditor, as well as the requirement of the conformity assessment system. And also in some of our IEC conformity assessment systems, we've actually found that the accreditation bodies are actually accepting the assessment results from our peer assessment for some of the organisations that we've carried out assessments for. So I hope that explains the situation with the MOU.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.
Clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, just before I move on, I would like to invite Martin, because I think, Martin, you're now with us verbally as well as connected. Is that correct? You there, Martin?
Yes. Hi. Welcome.
And anything you wanted to add at this point, Martin, seeing as though you haven't had the opportunity to participate as yet?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I don't have anything or any question at the moment right now. My questions I had were solved before, so thank you at the moment.
Excellent. Well, I notice in the chat feature here, we do have a question from Omar talking about imagine a scenario whereby a certain CB may provide a certificate without checking and a product reaches a certain country and found in compliance. So I think what we're saying there is a question over a certificate or concerns. Now, I'll give you now the response that we have in the IECEx, and that is that in such an event, we do require any questions relating to an issued certificate to be initially raised with the certification body that issued the certificate, because one of the requirements for a certification body to join our conformity assessment systems is that they must satisfy the requirements of IEC 17065. And 17065, setting out the fundamental requirements for bodies providing certification of products, has included as part of its requirements the need for a certifying body to be able to deal with questions, complaints, and appeals. So the first port of call is to always raise the matter with the certification body that issued the certificate. In IECEx, we also have a complaints and feedback mechanism whereby if the complainant feels that the certification body is not responding, then they can contact the IECEx Secretariat, my office, and we will take up the matter formally with the certification body to determine why they're not responding. And we find in the IECEx that there certainly is action taken. And again, this is one of the additional benefits of operating a global scheme such as the IECEx, the IECEE, the IECRE, and of course the IECQ, is that all of the systems are supported by a dedicated technical secretariat where you can, the industry, regulators, are able to contact in the event that they're not getting any joy out of the certification body. So if we're dealing with a certificate issued under the Conformity Assessment Systems, first port of call, the certifying body that issued the certificate. If you find you're not getting any cooperation or mechanism through that channel, then you contact the Secretariat. And we also have an appeals process within the systems as well. If you're dealing outside of the IEC Conformity Assessment Systems, I would suggest raising the matter with the certification body. And again, if you find the certifying body is not responding, then I would suggest contacting whoever have accredited that body. Wolfram, I wonder if there's something you might wanted to add, or do you think we've covered that from the other systems as well?
You took the words right out of my mouth, Chris. It's more or less exactly the same process. We might have small differences in the minutiae of the process, but in general, it's the very same.
Thank you. Now, I've got another question here that was submitted ahead of time. And again, we do have the chat feature, which feel free to utilise. But we did receive a question, and it's quite topical given the travel restrictions surrounding the COVID pandemic that we're all facing. And the question is, how to evaluate the risk in a remote online audit? Now, I've outlined how the IECEx operates, the fact that carrying out factory audits is a mandatory component and part of the certification process. So in other words, if the factory audit cannot be conducted, the certificate cannot be issued. And also, if the certificate has been issued, then to keep the certificate current, ongoing factory audits must be conducted at set periodic intervals. And if they cannot be conducted, then the certificate must go into suspension or even cancelled if we cannot carry out the ongoing factory audits. So very early this year, in the January timeframe, well before the formal declaration of COVID-19 as a pandemic, we found that we were receiving concerns from the certification bodies in IECEx and also some of our other systems such as the IECQ, that the certification bodies were placing restrictions, travel restrictions, on their auditors to travel to certain countries, and vice versa. Companies and factories were placing restrictions on who could come and visit their factories because of the nervousness surrounding the COVID-19. Because of this, the systems enacted very quickly an interim measure known as a business continuity document, known as in the IECEx, known as Operational Document OD60, to address this COVID-19 travel restrictions. And included in this document was the provisions for the use of remote auditing. Now, yes, there are risks in carrying out online or remote auditing, but let's start off by saying that the greater risk is to do nothing. Without the use of remote tools to ensure business continuity, as I said earlier, if we could not carry out the factory audits, then certificates would be suspended. Now, what are the consequences of suspending a certificate? The consequences are that the manufacturer cannot release product from the factory, carrying the IECX certificate reference number. So hence product not being regarded as certified. And of course, you can imagine the ongoing economic, commercial, and every other consequences that follow on from that. So from the IECX, we felt we needed to do something. And we looked close and very hard at the use of remote facilities, remote auditing facilities. And we found that we could still carry out a form of factory audit remotely, but there are some key elements that we've learnt so far and we continue to learn. And one of those, and I'll start off by saying right from the outset, careful audit planning. While we all know and agree that a successful audit requires an audit to be well planned, but when you're dealing with remote audits, careful audit planning is absolutely paramount. So you need to ensure everything's planned well in advance, be clear what it is you are wanting to address, how it's to be done and when, and communicating the audit plan in advance to the client. As part of the planning, we highly recommend that the audit actually provides for the spreading of time instead of over a couple of days to a number of days with a maximum of say 2 to 4 hours per day and then recapping at the end of that. So careful audit planning. Next thing is to ensure full access to the client's documentations through remote means. Also, and don't forget about the tour of the factory and also looking at the various tests and processes. For those, we highly recommend live streaming, not pre-recorded, but live streaming, and something as simple as such as Facebook. Those sorts of tools can be quite useful. So again, careful planning, but we also identified when we carried out this evaluation for using remote factory auditing, that auditing itself does pose its own risks that one needs to be careful of. AJ, I wonder if we could just quickly come to you as a certification body in the IECX that's had to implement this OD60 business continuity document to see if you may have any remarks regarding remote auditing.
Thank you so much, Chris. That's right, Chris, that when the COVID situation started, nobody really knew how long that situation would last. Therefore, the first set of rules that were immediately put into place was that we will be able to offer some form of postponement of the audit. But as soon as we had created that interim document, it was then evident that the COVID situation is going to be here for a longer duration. And at that point, you're completely right that we had to take the decision that doing nothing is much worse than doing a form of remote audit. I have done several remote audits now, and the feedback that we have got from our manufacturers has always been that we have been very well educated after the audits when you have come over in person, and we are completely getting educated even now by remote assessment. They are seeing the benefit of the remote assessment, especially because all the parties are being able to work together in being able to facilitate it. In that working together, it does mean that the manufacturer has to facilitate the person going around with a live streaming gadget in his hand. And we keep interrupting that walk around the site by talking to the people there. We have a look at the products while live streaming. But there's another very interesting feature which has been happening, and that is what I would call as screenshots. Screenshots is where they hold up the product, they show us a particular machinery, and with their permission, we take a screenshot which is then saved into our audit file. Everyone is seeing that that is actually increasing the accuracy of our audit records, because now we don't always have a person with a pen and a paper in hand and who's making some notes as they are going through the factory premises. They're actually being able to take screenshots which provide a very good proof of exactly what was shown during the audit. As we all know, that audits are always what we call as snapshots. A snapshot means that we have not taken over the manufacturer's system of producing the goods. We are only taking a sample of certain items and checking that those items have been properly been made. And as I said, the requirement that we have for audits are being now quite easily met by doing remote assessments. In the future too, we do see that the advantages that we've had with this remote assessment means that we will be mixing both of them in the future. We will be having on-site audits, but then we might be having a pattern where that after that one on-site audit, we might follow that up with one remote audit using this ODs that we have created for remote assessment. And this is working to everyone's advantage. So I would say that we have been able to work together in being able to find a solution during this COVID-19 times and to be able to proceed further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, AJ. And yes, it's certainly been a learning curve for all of us. And you're rightly point out that we're finding that we now utilising and look like utilising some of these remote facilities and features for the longer term, even well beyond COVID-19, which helps us all to be more efficient with our time and resources. We're now coming to the end of our 1 hour session, and unless there's any final questions or remarks, I would just like to end by thanking everybody for participating in this session. Also to remember that this session is being recorded, has been recorded, and the recording will be visible and available on the IEC Facebook and YouTube pages. And that we note that we do have some greetings from Facebook from many different countries, all spread around the world, which is great to see. And again, I thank you. This is a trial arrangement that we've done today. And from what I can see, the interaction, the very valuable participation and comments and questions that I've certainly seen makes this extremely valuable. If there are any further questions or comments, please feel free to post them to the IEC Facebook page. And with that, again, I thank you, but I also convey my own personal thanks to the IEC Central Office Communications Department for arranging this and for their initiative. Thank you. Good evening, good morning, good night, and please keep safe and take care of one another. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Chris.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.